Hi, everyone. I'm Noah Carr. Excited to be joined by Daniel here today. Quickly, my background: I run the enterprise team at Point 72 Ventures. I've been invested advising companies for the last 10 plus years or so, with a deeper focus in security as well as the broader infrastructure software landscape. And so excited to chat with you here today and excited to talk with Daniel.
Yeah, so my name's Daniel. Glad to be here. I'm glad it's actually you doing this. I remember us having two pretty cool conversations over the last couple of years. Yeah, I've been in security for around 24 years, and in the last year and a half, I've transitioned pretty much full time to building instead of securing, although I'm really doing both. I'm trying to secure with the building, but kind of transition full time to doing AI as kind of a container for everything else.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and agreed. It's always fun when we run into each other to chat about these things, and so it's a good experience to be able to have it recorded and be able to share it with others. So, look, I guess just kicking things off. I mean, like let's start, at the top here, right? Like, what do you think? Or share some views on AI's kind of current role in security. Like, where do you feel like they currently intersect?
Um, I mean, I think it's a really natural intersection. Just because so much of security is about finding patterns and explaining things, and I think finding patterns is a natural security thing. But I think the storytelling and narrative building of security component is kind of underplayed or not appreciated enough. I feel like it's being more appreciated in the last few years. That is CISO's role is not only to keep things secure, but also to do the marketing and explaining of what they're trying to do to the engineering groups and to the business. So I think there's a lot of advantage there. It's also a lot of advantage at the tactical side of like, if you have all this data about a potential incident inside the company, a big part of like, for example, a SOC analyst, a human SOC analyst job is finding all the things and then like needle and haystack sort of analysis. And that's precisely what LLMs are good at. So I feel like once we have the technology in place to go and collect all those things and bring everything together, and we have large enough context windows and or use of RAG to sort of be able to wrangle that much data, it's just massively going to help. It's massively going to help. And there's specifically one thing I think it's going to help with, which is scalability. So it's like, this is what I'm most excited about with AI, especially for security, is that most cases we're competing against the thing not being done at all. So we're sitting on terabytes of logs, terabytes of analysis. We have all these data lakes and everything, and it's like nobody's doing anything with it because the size of the security team is X. We have automation, but automation is not looking for patterns and context. So it's like, what if we had something that could actually look? Are we still on? I saw a little spinning thing.
I think we're good.
Okay, so what if we had something that could actually look at these terabytes of data or petabytes of data or whatever it is? It reminds me a lot of so like how many people of the 8 billion people on the planet have a mole that needs to be looked at? And how many of them have access to any doctor or nurse who could look at that mole? Like, it's a tiny fraction of 1%, right? It's actually the same for looking at whether or not anything in the sky is a meteor or not. It's the same thing with looking at terabytes of data. Is there insider threat inside the company? There's nobody looking at the content because we just don't have enough people. And people will also get tired. They have to sleep. Like, you got all these problems. So the thing I'm most excited about is having more eyes, especially around open source.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, as I've seen the market, right, it's just no longer a human scale problem, right? Like we've thought about trying to solve this SOC automation, challenge forever, right? Trying to democratize that function, and leverage the amount of security telemetry that we have today that's dumped into some large data lake that nobody can really leverage all that information, right? And that scales
Yep.
massively, right? And as that becomes no longer a human scale problem, yes, we can create all these different technologies that helps to democratize the function and bubble up the best signals. But the best solution is actually to be able to actually churn through all of those different signals that we have and come up with the best outcome,
Yeah.
especially as there's advancements on both sides of that coin. I guess you alluded to it a little bit. I guess there's sort of two different sides of the coin in terms of how open source plays a role in here, right? There's sort of like the AI's role in actually making sure that open source code is secure, and then also open source security's role in helping to secure, sort of our entire ecosystem. Maybe say a little bit more about like the impact that you see on both sides of those coins.
Yeah. What I would say is just having the eyes on the projects and then being able to use those eyes to look at as many components as possible and then to make that continuous. And then you combine that with grading or a score. So I'm already starting to think about some sort of thing like this for GitHub, where you've already got all these checks that happen. Microsoft has them. You're scanning from the inside. Is it Dependabot? I can't remember the name of the thing that they're using.
That's what GitHub had developed the Dependabot. I think it's the former Dependabot team that had helped to build out the GitHub security platform. Yeah.
Okay, right. So you imagine that, and then you imagine, okay, you've got like the old Sonar type stuff. You've got the supply chain stuff. With that many eyes of like continuous monitoring, and that could be a funded project eventually, it could be open source managed, however. But just imagine everything is being scanned all the time. But not only that, but you look at this XZ thing. What if it's also looking at every author that's contributing and sort of tracking that username and just being like, they've contributed to 17 different things over the last 19 years. And never have they contributed anything too nasty. There's never been any complaints about this username. So you have this like mosaic of all the people who've contributed and what their backgrounds are, and in terms of how many commits across how many projects. So you have like a contributor score. Then you have the components of the software, which is laid out in a tree. It's like, here are all the dependencies of the software. And that's like a green, red, orange type situation for each of the components. And then you have like this composite score of like, yeah, we feel pretty good about this open source project. And what's cool about that is it doesn't rely on the promise of many eyes from before, where it's like, oh, don't worry, open source eyes will do it. It's like, no, just because they can look at it doesn't mean they are looking at it. And that's the other thing that this can offer is like, this was scanned once an hour, every single hour since we turned on this project 4 years ago, right? And every time someone commits something new, it's checked in the following ways. So what you have is eyes applied to every step in the process continuously, and that's what yields the score.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And look, what I think that ties well back to is just thinking about the challenge that we faced forever around alert fatigue and how AI can be a strong component in doing sort of the alert triage piece, right? I mean, I think many of the people that I've talked to continue to struggle with just vuln prioritization, right? And thinking about where are the things that they need to engage with, right? And as you mentioned, as we are able to scale this up and actually able to analyze all of this new telemetry, it does create this new pain of, all right, well then what are the things that we have to, sort of prioritize in that stack to go after? But I also think that AI, plays a critical role in that as well, in terms of being able to do, better triage, give you better sort of broader vuln coverage, right? Maybe identify 0 days more quickly in the ecosystem. How are you thinking about sort of that side of the equation as well?
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. I'm building a whole bunch of stuff myself around that. It's so I did a talk about this at Black Hat US last year, and it was essentially, it started off with a markdown file for this fake company called Alma Security. And Alma Security, it was like, I don't know, it was some kind of fake bioauthentication company or something. But it was like, here's the mission of the company. Here are the goals of the company. Here's the customer base. Here's like what we're trying to do. We do business in California, in France, so we need to worry about that. In fact, we don't even have to list anything more than that. We just say we do business there. We have customers there. The models already know that they're very compliance heavy in those two places, right? So I then go down the list and I say, here are the things we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to I put in business goals, okay? Business goals, I'm trying to get this much market share. I'm trying to do this much. I'm trying to have 0 breaches of the following types, blah, blah, blah. Then I put my whole stack. I say my whole stack is all Microsoft, or my whole stack is all whatever, Apache and Struts or whatever. Then I put in my security concerns, which is essentially my risk register. This is one text file. It's not even getting that big. The risk register says, we've got a SQL injection on the front page of this. We've got this environment is too close to here. We've got some PCI, like pee in the pool, where we're like, we got things blurring from one environment to another. We should segregate these and things like that. So you basically put your nightmare list in there. You put your list of projects in there. You put your budget in there. You put your team in there. Sarah's working on this. Chris is working on this. Okay, that's a document. That's now like, whatever, 2,000 lines. We're already way, way inside the context, right? So what I started doing was asking questions. I said, Julie is connecting from Osaka at 2 a.m. on a Sunday night, and she's trying to get to the FS1 file server. Should this be allowed? And I'm sending this to the AI, right? And this is like whatever that was a year ago, and
Right.
I had pulled that into a Chroma database, so the whole thing was inside of RAG basically, and it was like, yeah, she should be allowed because I'm looking over here. It also had an employee record for her. It had a Slack. This is fabricated, of course, but it's like, here's a Slack conversation between her and her boss saying, yes, you can work remotely from Japan for those weeks. It also has an entry in the context file for what FS1 is. It's where they keep their crown jewels. Security goal 1 was don't lose customer data. Security goal 2 was don't lose our internal IP. So when I asked, are you allowed to do this? It said, yes, you can because of this. It said, because of these hours, because of these hours. Well, I then sent into the policy file that the CISO said no more remote connections because I saw some threat intelligence. No more remote connections to anything sensitive. That was it. However long that sentence is, that was all I sent into it. I asked the same question again. No. It said, it would have been allowed before the following reasons, but now this superseded it. So to your earlier point, what's exciting about this is, okay, here comes a new vuln, boom, 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 boom. Well, that vuln is now seen in the context. This has been the holy grail forever. I just got done, my last thing I did inside of kind of the regular security world was building a vuln management program inside of Robinhood. And this has always been the holy grail. And the whole problem with vuln management is like, how do I put this vuln? How bad is it for us? And if you have that deep context file or set of files, if you have that deep context, now you really can do a comparison and have this thing slot the vuln in on the priority list.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And look, I think coupled with that is also the value of AI in just simplifying the creation of new vuln templates for scanning, right? I mean, there is a lot of value that people have and, like institutional knowledge that they have, but they can start to leverage AI because it needs that level of flexibility in the ecosystem that we're starting to come into, right? Certainly, as you've mentioned, open source is becoming ubiquitous, and the amount of different code that you're leveraging and the number of different, parameters around, understanding if something is a risk and the sort of level of severity of that risk is totally new, right? And so, levels of being able to simplify the creation of those vuln templates, I think is another element that, it becomes really compelling in this market.
Yeah, 100%.
So I guess maybe shifting gears a little bit, like, let's talk more about, sort of AI's role in, you know, generating new attacks, right? I mean, I think what we've seen before, you can think of as the sort of security arms race, right? As the technology improves, the attackers, improve, and, so do the defenses need to improve. I guess, how do you think about, AI powered security systems? Potentially, how are they more susceptible to attacks, right? What are the new sort of attack surface or vulnerabilities that we're creating, in AI and the new techniques that, advanced attackers will use?
I think the number one way it's going to be used is the way that we were just talking about, which is the thing that we couldn't do before with attack surface was like keep doing it, right? We had okay, you could run the Nesta scan from 20 years ago, right? And then you get back to your report, you would look at it, you would probably do nothing, but let's say you did do something, that's fine. But it was point in time. And then, of course, I've been building, and a lot of other people have been building this automation to do attack surface management. That just means you're doing a point in time thing, but you're running it all the time. And I think what AI offers us is the ability to do it all continuously. So you have essentially pipelines. And I heard Karpathy talk about this, and it just changed my way of thinking about everything. And this was a couple years back. He was talking about the Tesla full self-driving workflow. And he's talking about how it's like 100 different components of like very stupid sort of AIs. And it's just like, okay, I take in sensor data, I look for these types of pixels, then I send it on this next thing. So it's this giant maze that weaves through. And then you have a car and it bumps into a curb. And they're like, okay, where in this 100 component system do I need to make an upgrade or a tweak, right? And then they would go fix that and boom, now it doesn't bump into the curb. Okay, cool, they've been upgraded. So I see the same thing when I look at attack surface management. And that's if I'm trying to protect myself at a small company, if I'm trying to attack a giant organization, or because I'm ex-military as well, I'm like, how do I attack a country? Okay, XZ comes out, Log4j comes out, and someone is getting ready to look at the United States and go after the worst, the nastiest, juiciest targets. What do they look like? How quickly can I get to them? How quickly can I take this brand new thing, this brand new toy that I have, and use it to its best ability? And that involves one pipeline for continuous discovery to find where the openings are, which hands off to the other pipeline, which is like, okay, what's the most sensitive? And then you've got another pipeline, go execute the attacks, pull out the goodies. So it's like, it's just this elaborate system of other ecosystems that are working in conjunction. And I'm really excited about that. I think the ultimate thing that ends up happening is ultimately defense is going to have those same exact mechanisms, okay? Attack's going to have the same exact mechanisms. The question is, who has the better context? Who has the better pipelines? And ultimately, who's able to have the shortest gap between new information and proper execution on the defense side or on the attack side? And I think, unfortunately, in the next few years, especially, except for the very, very top tier players who are going to be kind of matched, but for most people, red is going to have the stuff first. Red is going to move faster on the stuff, and they're going to have a shorter gap between new idea and attack than defense will. But ultimately, I think many years after that, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, something like that, the additional context that defense has should actually help them more. And this is an idea a buddy of mine, Joel Parrish, had as well. It's like maybe defense gets better later, but attack starts off worse. So right now, for the next foreseeable future, I think attack has a massive advantage.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I think there's a lead there. I mean, how do you think about the tools that should come to bear that sort of help protect organizations against those things, right? Like there's, prompt vulnerability scanners, right? Being able to create sort of new threat models around making sure that there isn't, prompt injection or looking for new, holes within sort of your existing security stack. Are there other tools that you've been seeing or things that you think are sort of new and novel that people will start to develop that will sort of hopefully fight against that threat that's coming?
I've seen a whole bunch of tactical stuff that's kind of doing like one piece of the puzzle. The thing I haven't seen yet that I would just really love is I want to see all of the internal workflows from like an external API being presented. And you identify where in that workflow AI is sitting and what capabilities it has. And then what you do is you map that back to, okay, this AI agent, which is listening for a command, it has access to the following tools. The following tools have access to the following things, and you have them color-coded by the type of data, the data classification that they have access to. But then it calls back to this API. This is the worst possible thing for like overall AI security is the fact that we're going to give agents access to these tools. The tools will be able to talk to Slack, email. I mean, email is password resets. I mean, it's like, oh, I hate when it does that.
I agree.
But like, yeah. So like, having an agent have access to your entire email server, even if it's only one user context, usually it's going to be a powerful user context because it needs to be able to do a lot of things. So now it's calendars, it's reading calendar invites, reading all of Slack, sending Slack messages. I mean, in order to make AI powerful, you have to give it a lot of rights. So the product that I would like to see is I want to see, okay, what are you presenting to the world? Where is AI listening? So one, it could be injected with prompt injection, but the other one is, forget prompt injection. I could just ask it to give me really important stuff and it might be over permissioned.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what am I presenting to the world through the lens of AI that if it were to be abused, I would be screwed. And I want a visual map of that. It's kind of like a visual threat model where you're showing, look, this agent is over permissioned.
Right. Yeah, and I think to a large degree, AI just plays such a big role in the defense of that, right? It's this idea around, building LLM firewalls, right? The prompt vulnerability scanners, right? It's you need to have sort of that same mindset, that sort of adversarial mindset when you're trying to do the mitigation to a bunch of these problems. Because it is just the challenge that we see in the market today is that, like there has to be nuance in terms of understanding these problems and being able to trust AI to go and potentially make the right mitigating sort of response to an attack that they see boiling up, or be able to match those behaviors to something that is malicious. And to your earlier point, like that is a more sophisticated problem than we've ever faced before. I guess within that realm, like how do you see the role of open source? Obviously, there's a massive, ubiquitous space of open source that is continuing to grow, but there's also a growing community of open source security, builders and providers that are, engaging with their ecosystem and probably sharing more than they ever have before. Like, how do you think about the role that community plays in advancing this level of AI and the importance of it going forward?
So I'm really excited about open source. I'm more excited than I've ever been for open source because the power of many eyes is now being activated. Okay? So the many eyes thing before was 100% true as an idea, but it was not activated because the eyes were not watching. The eyes were there, but they're not paying attention, so it didn't matter. Well, now the eyes can pay attention. And we have control over the eyes because we can just tell them, hey, look, your mission is to watch this one GitHub repo. Never sleep. Watch every 2 minutes. Watch every single commit, right? Watch every single new author. Watch everything. So what I'm really excited about is imagine a project like this. So you have this same sort of thing where that I was talking about before. It's a visual threat map where you have, okay, AI accepting this thing in here. Okay, prompt injection is one possibility there. Now, the project itself, the security project, what it would do is it would like interview you, and it would draw these maps for you. It would be like, okay, and this connects to this connects to Slack, blah, blah, blah. Here's the full map. But then it would say, kind of like you were saying before, and like this really old product, it was called Skybox way back in the day.
Yep.
And what it did was it gave you a network map, and it said at the time 23 was a thing, port 23. So it would be like, look, somebody can telnet from here to here, or SSH could go from here to here. But if you made the following change to the firewall, and it would give you an actual firewall rule for the iOS system, for Cisco or for the PIX or whatever, or Checkpoint. If you made the following changes, you would reduce your risky points by this amount. Well, this is the type of thing that you could do. You could basically have this thing where it's like, look, this agent is way overpowered. It has access to these 91 APIs. Those APIs have access to all these data stores. So your risk is X number. Our recommendation, like you said, prompt firewall in front of that guy. Remove these 19 APIs altogether. Change the permissions on these other 14 so they don't allow the access that isn't needed. And what's cool about this is the diagram will be open source. The connection map is open source. The recommendations are open source, and it's constantly being updated. And imagine, I mean, this is kind of like another way of thinking about the supply chain thing. To some degree, the supply chain thing, but more like transparent security or secure by design. If you just think in terms of like, look, do you see any problems with this? I'm showing you everything right here. This is it. And that's the promise of open source, is that you could actually see everything and still be secure. If you know how everything works and you're actually doing it the correct way.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a great point. And, look, it feels like I've seen in the past, a bunch of different attempts around, dynamic rule-based access, right? And, trying to sort of fix that challenge around authorization, right? That is still a legacy problem that, deals with a bunch of custom integrations to be able to do somewhat effectively. But I think AI is probably the new enabling technology to be able to actually do that effectively, right? And learn on the fly to make sure that you're not creating a hindrance within an organization in terms of what people have access to, but also being able to identify those things that are potentially malicious and identify them quickly so that you can, stop any malicious thing from happening, before there is, some DLP event or some, real issue that is caused. But again, like there's more work that you can do in real time. One area along these lines that I think is a new threat that, I'm not sure, there's quite a good solution for.
Can I say something real quick about that previous point?
Yeah.
One thing I find super exciting about that previous point that we just had is once you have that system in place, when somebody submits a new business proposal or a new technical document, the technical document will be like, we're building this website. It'll have this API or whatever. Right. Going back to the whole vulnerability thing and the whole security assessment thing, you can simply drag that document into the thing and say, what should I know about? And it'll be like, well, actually, this is going to upgrade this. This is going to upgrade this. This is also connecting to this. Therefore, you're adding this many risky points or whatever. This thing represents X amount of extra risk because it's modifying this overall threat model in the following way. So it's the previous context plus new things coming in, which is something we've not been able to do before.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And, the other element that I see here that I'm not sure that there's a great solution for, but it fills in along the lines of what we've chatted about is just, dealing with data poisoning in the future, right? Like there's a lot of things that, will be somewhat outside of our control in terms of understanding that. And I'm not sure that there is a great solution to dealing with, some level of data poisoning, some, level of subversion that can go on in terms of how these models are trained in the future. I'm curious how you see sort of like, again, that role that AI can play and potentially even the open source community in terms of making sure that we can, stunt the effect of potential data poisoning in the future.
I mean, I hate to keep going back to it, but the solution is to just assume it's going to happen and have checks for it and have those checks executing all the time. So, for example, if you have like this, if you have a data lake, and then you have like this mechanism, this AI mechanism that's being done against some portion of the data in the data lake, that's resulting in a decision, and that decision does this important business thing. Well, that's all on the map. And this ultimate decision-making thing at the business level is something like we make the purchase of the stock, or we fire off the we make the payout of the insurance policy or something, right? Well, the AI will see that, okay, we're doing payouts here. Those are not reversible. We're going to lose customers if it's bad. This is all bad. So it sees the criticality of this flow, and then again, we've told this thing to continuously threat model every single pipeline, which means one of the threat models for this thing is someone drops something into the data lake, which then gets consumed and moves up the pipeline, which means they're going to be like, okay, well, we're dropping in this control, which stops it at this layer. We're dropping in this control, which stops it at this layer. We're going to add extra people that say, if you drop in data, it must be checked by these people, whatever the controls are. Or it could be something further up the chain that says, if you're about to render a thing that says pay out over 2x, which you would normally pay out, that's another gate. So it's like the thing is designed to not only threat model it, but also recommend checks for various levels in the pipeline. And then make sure the checks are actually happening. That was one thing that's really exciting is when you have a system of checks in place. You know what's really exciting about this is a QA. What's really exciting about this is QA. The entire QA world has always been like, move to the side, see if you can bump into the wall, try it again. And it's like, once again, you have many, many hands, many, many keyboards, many, many eyes to just be like, continuously try that. So the crazier extension of this is like the old Chaos Monkey stuff and the old Netflix stuff. So now imagine all the pipelines are working, your entire business is working, all your security controls are working, but now you empower a little Chaos Monkey and it just runs in here and starts turning off servers. So now you're moving towards anti-fragile. It's like, no, we want you to try to mess things up and we're still going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point because we're making this shift, right? We're making this shift from a QA perspective, from going from a thing that was deterministic, historically, where we knew the outcomes that would come, to something that is now stochastic, right? And so like it may be random in terms of the outcomes that we find. And so like the traditional QA model also in my mind needs to change, right? It's sort of like, it's not just about the things that you do post-production. It's also being able to monitor those things, post-production, and being able to understand what are the things that are changing over time, and then be able to make changes real time. And certainly as we integrate more AI into code, that's going to become a bigger and bigger problem that people will certainly be thinking about, right? Because it will be just more random, and we will be leveraging these tools more and more within the code bases that we have, and generating what we have even as open source code, or doing that level of maintenance. I'm curious, how do you think about that shift in just actually writing code, right? And going to this place where we have more of these stochastic type of outcomes, especially the implications that has on, open source in general, but also, AI and, protecting against, the challenges that we see.
Yeah, I think the way we're going to generate code, I almost feel like it's about to be like this verbally. I'm not sure how much longer the humans are going to be hands-on keyboard versus more of like a dialogue with like a set of AI agents writing code. And but most importantly, won't be so much that interaction. It'll be like this little thing that they have over on the side, which is like the testing version of it being built.
Right.
So you the coder, you have the person, the AI that you're talking to. It's like, oh, you mean like this? And then we look over and it's running. And it's like, no, that's not right. We need the interface over here. Um, and it's being tested, and it's like, okay, now throw the security tests at it. Now it's failing, and we say, okay, well, you didn't incorporate cross-site scripting or whatever it is. So it's like
Right.
you're like live iterating on a live environment through this conversation. And ultimately, I'm not sure why we're typing the code in, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. I don't know. I think there still will be some people doing that, but more and more it'll move up the stack to where it's more of a dialogue and a conversation. Because the currency at that point for the developer will be the idea rather than the syntax of the code.
Right. Yeah, and we've touched on this a bit, but there are these broader implications. I mean, from what I've seen, pen testing is a big business. Certainly in discussions that I've had, that ends up being a budget line item at the end of the year. People leverage to go and do some level of outsourced red teaming, internal red teaming, type of work within the organization to identify different vulnerabilities. How do you feel like that market changes, with AI, like those firms that are leveraging and doing some of what is at least, seems today to be, mostly manual work. How does that change the ecosystem from an AI component? And does it change how people do it potentially internally versus externally?
Yeah, I think internal is it's all going the same place, which is just a bunch of agents running these tools. But it's very much the same exact idea. It is define exactly what you want in terms of pipelines. This is why I love AI so much, is because it requires you to perfectly articulate exactly what you want. So if you can perfectly articulate a red team and the concepts of a red team, and you give it proper access and you give it, intelligent agents combined into teams, because now your red team can not be 10 people or 3 people or 1 person or 25. It could be 2,500 separated into different teams with different levels of expertise. And it could just grind all day, every day, looking for new stuff. Plus, it's got a research arm, so it's learning new stuff and incorporates that into the attacks. So I think that's definitely where it's going, but that could take some time because so much, I'm sure you know this, and a lot of listeners already know this. A lot of the red team's problem is not even doing the hacking. It's like, how do I get to that environment? Like, who is the team do I even talk to get access to that? So it's like all these just technological siloed, and AI can't solve that. Like, if it just doesn't know who to talk to. I mean, it will eventually, but that's going to take some time. So I think external attack surface management type vibe is already happening now. I'm already building that stuff. I got many friends. So basically all my automation bug bounty stack stuff, I'm converting over to agent based, right?
Yeah.
And that will replace a lot of the pen testing space, because it allows you to do analysis and re-attack and recheck type stuff with the agent team. But on the inside of corporations are just nasty. So I expect there'll be a lot of stops where the AI just doesn't know what to do because it doesn't have the right credentials, the right, access to Okta. It just gets confused. Now, true AGI might be able to solve that because now we can launch tickets and be like, hey, I'm the AI red team and I'm stuck. Can you give me access? Which is frightening for another reason.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, a lot of this is driven by what I think is, more just underlying complexity, right? I mean, we've already moved, shifted away from, a lot of the back end work we used to do just because the underlying, infrastructure itself has gotten so complex, right? And as we continue to move and sort of abstract away bits and pieces of that, right? Like there needs to be foundationally more of these, AI agents built that can explore and do that type of work. I mean, you noted it from the beginning. It's, we now have the capabilities to do this work continuously, and it could be 2,500, it could be 25,000, right?
Yes.
That are continually doing this work. And I think that, certainly open source will play a critical role in that. You mentioned sort of the research arm, right, of these AI agents. I think that can be pulled from the open source community, and people like you and others who have this level of expertise that can help to train those models. How do you think about that role going forward, and the specific things that that you think about in making sure that there is these aspects of the work and the institutional knowledge of people who have expertise here that is properly layered into these AI models, these AI agents, as you think about, the sort of new threat models of the future.
Yeah, I think this is why a lot of people are saying philosophy is becoming a thing, the humanities are becoming a thing, because the questions become more important than the answers. You have to know exactly what you want to do. You have to be able to perfectly articulate it. This is also why I like granular tooling. This is why I've always been like, Project Discovery has always been my favorite thing, because it's like one small tool that does one thing well. And like, that's what my whole stack is based on. It's what it's going to continue to be based on, even after I make this transition fully to AI. It's like, if you can perfectly describe to a friend, then you can perfectly describe it to an AI. And ultimately, you just have this map. And the tooling that you need, the mental tooling that you need, is the ability to describe what you want, to describe the outcome, to describe the components that need to happen to make that outcome take place. And you've got to be able to lay that out. You got to be able to describe it, articulate it. And people who are good at one particular skill or executing on a task, but they can't zoom out and kind of see the whole thing, I think they're in the most danger from AI, because they'll just be getting assaulted from all sides at all times by surprises. Where if you zoom out and see the whole thing, you won't be as surprised.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and it plays a critical role in making sure that these systems of the future are just better hardened systems, right? I mean, you can do a lot more of this work up front to make sure that it's continuously staying hardened and being, a system that's harder for someone to breach, right? And so I think that's a critical component here. One thing we haven't really touched on, and sometimes ends up being a laggard in this space, at least in my opinion, is, the regulatory environment, right? What are you seeing from, regulatory compliance, legal, around a bunch of, these new implications to AI, and also leveraging a lot more open source? I think there's some areas where they've been able to catch up, but I also think there's some areas that, is moving so quickly that it's difficult to sort of, drive the type of innovation that we'd like to see in terms of understanding all of these different risks around, new, data protection, thinking about HIPAA requirements. I'm curious how you see those implications sort of layering into some of the things that we've talked about.
Yeah, it's an exciting time there as well. Mostly, I feel a lot of energy coming from places like CISA. I feel a lot of energy, positive energy, positive protective energy from the government. I feel like Jen and CISA, they're just doing things that actually should be done, and they're actually doing things in the market failure space where only the government can kind of think about those sort of problems, just because, the market's not designed to do that. What I'm especially sort of watching is this is happening largely around the supply chain stuff. So solar winds, that type of situation. So that's where a lot of the energy is coming from. But now we have this AI thing, which is bringing a lot of sort of fear. And I think the biggest fear is actually going to be around the open source models and what you could do with them. Like, especially you spin up a project like Olama in like 3 seconds. However long it takes you to download a big model, it's uncensored. And you ask it, how do I hack the planet? How do I overthrow the government? How do I do all these things? And you can record a YouTube and just be like, here's a list of steps. Now, all it's going to take is a 1 or 7 of those to happen, where the manifesto that comes out later, where some sort of bad incident happens, and they show that it was an open source model from Hugging Face. And that's what they used to get the idea about how to do this bad thing. And I think that's going to produce legislation. And the danger there is that the open source models get shut down and you end up with these few at the top that are pinnacle. And of course, they're all owned by very large tech companies. So I think there's a bunch of pressures there. But in general, the way that CISA is going right now, I feel like it's all positive.
Yeah, I think they're doing the right work, and some of it is just seeing the scale of what attacks come forward, right, and understanding this landscape, which I agree is it's just fastly moving, right, and it's difficult to come up with new regulation, in my mind at least, without really knowing what the risks that exist out there, right? I mean, certainly, I have my own predictions in terms of things that we'll continue to see scaling, right? We've already seen a big uptick in, phishing attacks, right? I assume we'll see more of these polymorphic type of attacks, which will be interesting. I'm curious, what are the other things that are, maybe top of mind for you as you sort of just think about the next 6-12 months or so, predictions of what are the things that are going to shift and change, or the new attacks that we're going to see, or things that we're going to see more of that you're keeping top of mind?
Yeah, one really big one for me is what's real? Like, how do you build a society on non-shared reality?
Yeah.
And that's a real big issue for me. So I feel like this is probably a type of thing. I might be, well, I won't say too much about that one. But so essentially, I think what we have to do is we have to establish, maybe at the government level, maybe some sort of collaboration. I don't know. It'd be like NPR, Fox News, and CISA combined. But you make something like back in the day with Snopes. Okay, you remember Snopes? So
Yeah.
it was like did the kid really fall off the slide the way it
Right.
looks like in this video? And then it would be like yes or no, and it would show the evidence for whether or not it happened. And then it would be like 99% he did not fall off the slide or something like that. But now let's do it for viral things. Like, did Russia really do that thing? Was that really ISIS? Weird claims coming from all over the internet. Weird videos come out. It's a deepfake. It looks exactly like it actually happened. I mean, everyone thought these deepfakes were going to happen like 3, 5, 10 years from now. It's 2024. It's already happening. The deepfake tech came out just a couple years ago. It's already getting hard to tell. So if you see Obama doing this, or some politician doing that, or Zuckerberg doing this or that, it's really bad that we can't actually tell, and we're definitely not going to be able to tell very soon. So we're going to need some sort of like watermarking technology, where it's like you can cryptographically prove that this content came from the authoritative source. And then we're also going to need it for actually videos and stuff. So you and I might like have a shared pennant or a shared key, like in the Signal app or something, where you and I pre-talked because we've talked at conferences before. Well, now that we get on video, so check this out. So your video will pop up something, my video will pop up something, and then I use my thing to look at the thing you're presenting, and it uses the pre-shared one to check the validity of the one that you're showing live in the video. So now we've authenticated this video that's actually you.
Right.
Something like that. There's going to have to be an infrastructure there for verifying that it is who they say they are when you're talking to somebody, but also verification that media actually came from the true source. And that's not an ecosystem of companies that I've seen come up yet, but I think it's about to like violently emerge because it's going to be so needed.
Yeah, I agree. I've not seen too many companies, but I do agree that it's a large scale problem. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, there needs to just be a level of skepticism, right? That I think the broader community needs to have in terms of these levels of engagement, that, you have to be able to sort of trust the party and recognize that, the deep fakes and other ways to subvert someone's understanding of who they're engaging with or whatever it might be are just going to become more advanced, right? And I think there needs to be some interesting ways that we can sort of push that world forward. I mean, certainly, yeah, WorldCoin and retinal scanning and sort of thinking about your online identity are all really compelling and interesting. But I agree, I haven't seen as many of those types of solutions as I thought that I might just given the broader repercussions and and issues associated with it. So
Yeah, yeah. The real quick on this,
yeah,
the
go
thing
ahead.
I'm worried about is that you can't have a society if people don't believe the same things, right? If there's no way to confirm facts, like opinions, it doesn't matter if they're different, as long as you can agree on some set of facts. So I think you're going to need, maybe it's many organizations, like little mini Snopes, and maybe some are like more leaning in different directions. But an AI will be able to look at like 20 of those and be like, they all said the kid didn't fall off the slide. So in my mind, the kid didn't fall off the slide. You've got to find some way to do that.
Right.
Otherwise, people are literally just going to believe whatever they want to believe. And the silos are going to get much worse.
Yeah, completely agree. Um, any other topics you wanna hit on? You want to talk through? Look, I think this has been great, and we've covered obviously a lot of ground here. But anything else that we haven't touched on that you thought would be interesting to go a level deeper on?
No, I think this is a good place to stop up here at the society level. It's a pretty nasty problem.
Exactly. Yeah, a huge problem, and it certainly has broader implications on all of us. So, but look, Daniel, been a great conversation as always. And
Yeah.
look, like obviously, like a lot of implications to come. I think AI, as we've noted, and a lot of the work that you're doing is incredible in terms of just giving more visibility of what the world is going to look like 5 years, 10 years from now. And I think it's incredibly valuable, the work that you're doing, and also what you're sharing with the rest of the community in terms of creating that valuable sort of feedback loop and research aspect to hopefully training the AI and the agents we use in the future. That I think, again, like it's all about the community, and especially within open source and leveraging that open source and what it can do to protect the open source and harden our internal systems that protects all of us. And so I think it's incredible work, and really exciting to see what's to come. And I look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thanks for having me.